Thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Kevin Fries with the Cuyahoga County Office of Emergency Management, and joining us today are Mark Christie, the Director of Emergency Management for Cuyahoga County, and Stephen Click from Ohio, the state of Ohio. Mark, I will turn it over to you for welcomes and introductions.
Thank you, Kevin. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully some of you were on our first speaker presentation for this series or for this year's series. It was the cybersecurity presentation from Jerry Mio. Now we're entering into our second presentation in the series, which is going to be given by Stephen Glick on crisis awareness and self-care. Just a little bit about the history of our speaker series and our emergency management summit. If you're new to these concepts, our county for the previous several years has tried to put on an in-person summit or a speaker series annually as a way to engage our public safety partners in interesting topics and bring speakers and material to them that they otherwise might have limited access to. So this year we put on another speaker series, which consisted of 3 different presentations. Again, the first one occurring in October was on cybersecurity. This one will be on self-care. And then the final presentation in this series will be given by Lewis Taylor, who is the chief of the Office of Access and Functional Needs in the California Governor's Office. And he'll be discussing integrating access and functional needs into emergency planning. So that one will occur on December 6th at 1 p.m. And if you haven't registered yet for that one and are available to, I'd encourage you to take advantage of that. With that, I will just give a quick introduction to Stephen Click, and turn it over to him. So Stephen Click serves as the current Director of First Responder Wellness and the Ohio Department of Public Safety and Office of Criminal Justice Services. His presentation is a consolidated version of the crisis awareness and self-care training course that he offers. The issues he'll discuss will include physical, cognitive, and emotional responses to trauma, alcohol and drug issues, and techniques and strategies for working through effects of a traumatic incident. Again, I appreciate you all for being here today, and special thanks to Steve Click for giving us our presentation. With that, Steve, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate it. I appreciate this opportunity to come and speak with you folks this afternoon. Mark, are you able to see the screen okay?
Yes, I am. And real quick, I just want to make one final comment that I forgot to make, if you permit me to, is we will coordinate a Q&A for Steve's presentation at the following his speech. We ask that you put your questions into the Q&A feature in Zoom, and Kevin will read those questions out loud and for everybody to hear, and then Steve will respond to them. So if you as Steve is speaking and you have something that you want to pose to him, please do so through the Q&A feature.
Excellent. Well, thank you, sir. Good afternoon, folks. Again, as Mark was saying, my name is Steve Click. I'm the Director of the Ohio Office of First Responder Wellness through the Ohio Department of Public Safety Office of Criminal Justice Services. I retired from the Ohio State Highway Patrol in November of 2018. I had 36 years with the division. My last position was I was lieutenant in the Office of Personnel Ohio Assist program, which is a program that offers 3.5-day seminars to police, fire, EMS, corrections, dispatch, Ohio-based military personnel. We'll talk about that a little bit at the end. I'm going to talk to you folks a little bit this afternoon about self-care and why self-care is important given what you folks do for a living. Now, I really doubt that anything I'm going to talk about today is going to cause anybody to feel any level of discomfort or uncomfortable. We're just talking about taking care of yourself, but I never know where folks are at any point in time in their life. So if you do start to feel uncomfortable, don't feel bad. Just go ahead and log off. We can get the information to the folks at EMA. They can get you a copy of it. That's never a problem. But I understand, people have different things going on in their lives at different times, but I really don't think it'll be an issue for us. Now, every day you folks are faced with traumatic and stressful situations. And the question sometimes comes up is, what do we consider to be a critical or traumatic situation? And the answer to that is yes. And the reason I say it that way is this: if it is critical or traumatic to you, it's critical or traumatic. After I retired from the Highway Patrol, I worked for the Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services for 2.5 years as their first responder liaison. And I learned a great deal working with the folks at Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services, wonderful organization. But the folks there liked me to say, you're having a normal reaction to an abnormal circumstance. Well, if you've been around the Highway Patrol for more than a minute, you know that we can't leave anything alone. So I say you're having a normal reaction to an abnormal circumstance for you right now. I think it's important that we understand that, no matter what you do, no matter what you did before, no matter how long you've been doing this, next week, a month from now, a year from now, you can have a reaction to a situation unlike any reaction you've ever had before. And that's perfectly okay. That's perfectly normal. There's no problem with that. And you can take two individuals who seemingly would react the same way, same age, same background, same years of experience, even possibly a very similar position. And they will react to a situation entirely different. Maybe one is married, the other is not. Maybe one has children, the other doesn't. Health issues, money issues. There's a number of different filters that we look at it through. So as we look at this and we talk about this afternoon, just kind of keep in mind the idea that stress and trauma is as unique as the individual. But sometimes you folks have emergency situations. I mean, it's in the name of your agency. And much like public safety, the folks that I normally work around, nobody calls EMA or any of their partners probably to say, hey, just wanted you to know everything's going great here. Everything's going well. We're healthy. We're happy. We're safe. All the facilities are good. All our infrastructure is good. Just thought you guys want to know. That's not when they call you. They call you when something has really gone sideways, when something has really gone bad, and they need you to come in to help them. So, you have those situations that possibly come up. They could come up at any time. They're not always weather related. They can be any number of things related. But in addition to the work that you folks do, life happens, home happens. And home is a very unique dynamic because one of the worst things or probably one of the dumbest things I ever heard when I was on the Highway Patrol is what happens at home stays at home and what happens at work stays at work. Well, the reason that was so dumb is the common denominator was me. So when things happen at your home, you bring them to work with you. When things happen at work, you take them home with you. And home can be a unique dynamic. There's family issues, there's money issues, there's the home itself. I mean, you could have a home issue or something like that. There's a number of things that happen. And, for some of you, maybe during the last couple of years, you had moved to more of a hybrid schedule where maybe you were in some of the time and at work some of the time. I got put on house arrest. And I really didn't like it. When I was with OMOS, my last day in the office was March 13th of 2020. They told us to take our stuff home, our computers, and we were going to be working from home for a couple of weeks. Well, here we are now, November of 2022, and those folks are still primarily working from home. So home looked a little bit differently. Maybe you had children that were at home, maybe taking homeschooling or whatever. Maybe you've got family that are living with you that were displaced as a result of what was going on, or maybe you're helping take care of family members that might have some health issues. So home looks different at times. And that, again, is something that you bring to work with you and take home after the workday. Kids. Now, I don't care if we're talking about big, tall kids or if we're talking little kids. It doesn't matter. It's a unique dynamic, making sure that the kids are doing their schoolwork. We did not have social media like they do now when I was younger, which, could obviously be an issue. We didn't have some of the same issues the kids do today. So making sure that your kids are healthy, making sure that your kids are happy, that they're safe, they're being taken care of, that adds to the stress that you already feel with work. And then there's your health. We do a lot in public safety and also in emergency management to mitigate the physical risks of our job. Just to give you an example, in law enforcement, body armor costs about $1,000, pistol between $600 and $800, taser upwards of $1,200 to $1,400, the radio $4,000. I mean, it's pretty expensive to put a police officer on the road. Fire service, coat, pants, boots, gloves, turnout gear, $5,000 per firefighter. We spend a lot of money to mitigate the physical risks. The last couple of years, though, It's been difficult to mitigate those physical risks because of a lot of things that we didn't understand. And again, when they call you folks out, they're not calling you out because it's a pretty sunny day and it's nice and it's, they're calling you out because maybe there's been a flood, maybe there's been a tornado, maybe there's been a blizzard, an explosion of some sort, a train derailment. There's a million things that you folks could get called out on. None of them are good. And that puts your physical health at risk. And although we do everything we can to try to mitigate and minimize and train away those risks, the risks are still there on top of the job that you're already doing, on top of the life that you're already living. Your focus, because of what you do, is almost always on taking care of others, your family, your friends, your coworkers, your community. The reason that they've asked me to talk to you folks this afternoon for just a little bit is to remind you you're important too. And taking care of yourself has to be a priority. Not necessarily the priority, but it certainly has to be a priority. I want to talk about the concept of bears and ducks for just a second. And the concept of bears and ducks goes like this. If you're taken out by a bear, it's loud, bloody, exciting, violent. Usually it's a one-shot deal. For law enforcement, a bear could be the use of deadly force by or against an officer, mass casualty situation, loss of a coworker. All of those will qualify as a bear. And the problem with bears and ducks is this. Only you can decide what's a bear for you and what's a duck. I can't decide for you. Your boss can't decide for you. Your spouse can't decide for you. Only you can decide what qualifies as a bear or a duck for you. And I look back at my career, and folks, I don't believe I have any bears. 36 years I spent on the highway patrol. I never fired my weapon at a human being. That's the rule. That's not the exception. That's the rule. Almost every officer I know goes their entire career and never fires their weapon anywhere but the firearms range. My father's retired from the patrol, as is my cousin. 104 years between the three of us. None of us ever fired our weapons at a human being. Shot a lot of paper, smoked several deer, but fortunately we never had to fire our weapons at a human being. I got shot at one time. I was in Union County. We had a report of an individual walking up the roadway with an assault rifle. Myself and the deputy got out there to check the area. We found the car. We crawled over the right-of-the-way fence and we started out in the woods when we heard the gun go off and the bullet hit the trees above our head. When we came out of the tree line, he was shooting towards the trees because he thought he was just target shooting. He thought the trees would stop the bullet. Well, he wasn't trying to shoot at us. He didn't even know we were there. So never fired my weapon at a person, only got shot at once, and I really didn't get shot at. I just was in the wrong place. So I look back at my 36 years, and I don't believe I have any bears. Now, you might look at that situation, some of the situations I was involved in, and ask yourself, how is that not a bear? Because for me at the time, it just wasn't. It was Tuesday. Now, if you're taken out by ducks, my buddy there on the right, it's not loud, bloody, exciting, or violent. It takes place over a very long period of time. End result is exactly the same. And everybody takes my friend there on the left seriously, or at least they should. Nobody gets too excited about that guy on the right because, again, it's a duck. But after 5, 10, 25, 30, or 30 plus years doing this job, ducks take a toll. Every single time you have a duck, ducks take a toll. And while I hope that as we're talking this afternoon, as you're thinking back at some of the things you've been involved in, I'm hoping that if anybody has any bears here or what they perceive to be bears, they're few and far between. But I'll guarantee that every single one of you has ducks. Every one of you, personal and or professional ducks. Guarantee it. My first professional duck was September 22nd, 1985. It was my first day driving. So on the highway patrol, you go through the training academy, you come out and you're assigned to an experienced officer called your coach. And you ride with that coach for 60 working days. The first 10, they drive, and then you start driving. And once you start driving, you're responsible for pretty much everything. The coach is along for as an observer, just along to keep, get an idea what you're doing and correct you if you start to get too far off course. So it's my first day driving. I get to the post 2.5 hours early. I have that patrol car looking immaculate. I mean, I cleaned and washed the whole car. I waxed the light bar. I swept out the inside. I put tire shine on the tires. I checked the oil pressure. I checked everything. That car shines. It's got film, forms, and fusees. I mean, I am ready to hit the road. My coach walks out of the post, and we ended up being very good friends, but this is only my 11th day working. And he walks out with a pipe in his mouth, and he looks at the car and looks back and forth and goes, I guess it'll have to do. And that was just kind of the way it was going to be. We got in the car and we headed out towards Interstate 71. I was assigned at the Delaware post of the patrol. As we start out towards Interstate 71, Bill looks at me and says, "Find a place to pull over and turn the car off." Now, folks, I want to go work. I've been waiting for this opportunity. I get to drive. This is what I've been working towards for a number of years, and had seen that car sitting in my driveway my whole life. I was ready to go be a state trooper. I looked at him and said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Find a place to pull over and turn the car off." So I found a place to pull over and turn the car off, and I'm looking at him. And Bill's going through this big 3-ring binder about yay big that's my coach's guide, things he has to cover with me over the next 50 days in order for me to be cut loose. I get a radio call, report of an injury crash, rollover, possible entrapment, 3 miles from where Bill and I are. Now, I never wanted anybody to get hurt in my line of work, but come on, this is what I've been waiting for. Turn the lights on, turn the siren on, drive fast. I know I'm going to beat the squad there, so I get a chance to help people. This is what I've been training for and working towards. It felt like my whole life. Before I could start the car, Bill says, "Get out." I looked at him incredulously and said, "What do you mean, get out?" He says, "I drive to injury crashes, rookie. Get out." So I get out of the car. I stomp around the front like a 4-year-old. I get in the passenger seat. We drive to this crash. Not near as fast as I would have driven. We get to the crash, and it's on South 3Bs and K Road in Delaware County, Brown, Berlin, Berkshire, and Kingston townships. That's the road. That's the townships the road goes through. So it's called 3Bs and K Road. At that time, 3Bs and K Road was a very crowned county road. It ran south off of US 36 in Delaware County out towards Interstate 71 on the east side of the county. We arrive at the scene. In the field is a light blue Chevy pickup truck on its side. Standing in the roadway is the young man who had been driving. 16-year-old driver, 17-year-old male passenger. 16-year-old male driver, kind of a slightly built young man. The 17-year-old, big strapping football player. I'm trying to find out from the 16-year-old what happened when all of a sudden the rescue squad and the firefighters and the EMS are pulling up on the scene. As I'm trying to find out from the 16-year-old how they rolled over. Now understand, it was a beautiful day. It was clear, it was sunny, it was warm, it was very nice. And I'm trying to figure out how they possibly rolled over on this straight road. When one of the medics walks by me and he says, "Hey, trooper, the kid underneath the truck is dead." Now, he didn't say that to cause any problems. He was just letting the investigating officer know this is a fatal traffic crash. He knew it changed what I did compared to an injury crash or a non-injury crash. The 16-year-old begins to have a meltdown now because he just heard that his friend is dead. As I'm trying to get him calm and I'm trying to get the medics over to look at him, I hear tires squeal. In fact, one car didn't even make it into park. It's the families. They're coming from the same breakfast the young men had been at, going to the same home. They're bailing out of the car. They're running out in the field. They're getting in the way of the firefighters. They're getting in the way of the medics. There's all this chaos going on. The 16-year-old is laying on the roadway. He is just completely melted down. My coach walks by me, and in the most compassionate, caring way possible, he says, "Don't F this up." Except he didn't say F. In other words, you're 11 days out of the academy. You're 21 years old, but guess what, pal? It's your first day driving. This is all on you. I'm just here as an observer. Now, I look back at that morning, and that was definitely a bear for that young man. That was definitely a bear for those families. For me, for the deputies, for the medics, that was a duck. One of a very long line of ducks through the course of my career. And over the course of time, as I said, ducks take a toll. The other reason I like the analogy of the duck for what you folks do is you have no idea what's going on in his world. He could be hanging out on a pond this morning, enjoying a nice, pretty sunny day, enjoying the weather. He could be fleeing from a predator. We have no idea what's going on in his world. And that's the same thing that we all do. No matter what's going on in your life at this time, when you come to work, you put on your game face and you go to work. And nobody has any idea of what's going on in your world. And very seldom do we share. But what we do know is there are things going on in your world. Every day you come in, just because you don't show it, like our friend the duck there, we know those things are going on. So let's talk about a couple of issues of self-care. Well, number one, we need to acknowledge the fact that stress and trauma can affect us physically. Hypertension, for one. Now, when I went to the training academy for the Highway Patrol, I had been a motorcycle officer for 6.5 years before I went to the training academy. When I got to the training academy, I was the division armorer. I was responsible for anything that went bang. So firearms, ordering firearms, ammunition, targets, repairing firearms, tracking training, anything that went bang, I was responsible for. Well, one of the things they do, because we run an indoor range at the Highway Patrol, is you have to do a blood test every 3 months to determine whether or not you have certain contaminants in your bloodstream. It's an OSHA requirement. So the very first time I go in to get my blood test, and the academy nurse takes my blood pressure. He goes, "Lieutenant, your blood pressure's really high, sir." I said, "Well, this happened and that happened." And he goes, No, I'm just telling you your blood pressure is really high. You need to schedule an appointment with your family doctor." I said, "Okay, Pat, I promise." I lied. 3 months later, I come in. He goes, "LT, your blood pressure is worse than it was. Did you schedule your appointment with your doctor?" I'm like, "No, I got busy and this happened and that happened." He goes, "Look, I'm telling you, sir, it's really, really important. You need to see your family doctor. Your blood pressure is dangerously high. Promise me you'll go see your doctor." "Pat, I promise." I lied. 3 months later, I come in. He goes, "Look, pal." So all rank was out the window. "If you don't go see your family doctor, I'm going to tell the captain you have high blood pressure issues." Now, I looked at him very smugly and I said, "You can't tell the captain that because that would be a HIPAA violation." He said, "I don't care, sue me." So in other words, he wasn't impressed and he wasn't intimidated. So I went to see my family doctor, talked to him about what was going on, and they took my blood pressure in one arm, and then they took my blood pressure in the other arm. The doctor said, "Steve, your blood pressure is horrible. It is dangerously high. And if we don't get on top of it, you're setting yourself up for stroke or heart attack. If you get a vote heart attack. You either make it or you don't. If it's a stroke, you could be somewhere in the middle." So he wrote me a prescription. I got it filled that afternoon. And every morning since then, including this morning, I take a tiny little pink pill, which helps regulate my blood pressure. But I had to combine that with better coping skills. That job was what it had been before. That job has continued to be that since I left there. I combined my poor coping skills with my physiological high blood pressure, and I was setting myself up for a major medical emergency. Folks, you can't have major medical emergencies in the middle of a response, because then what happens is emergency services has to divide their attention. They can't abandon the original call, and they can't just to take care of you, and they can't abandon you to take care of the original call. So now instead of being able to focus on what they're doing, now they have to split their attention. So if you don't know what your blood pressure is, find out, go to the doctor, have somebody check, and whatever they tell you, follow it to the absolute letter. It's not only important, it's vital, because you folks have a stressful job. You could have a situation where it's very stressful, very dangerous even. And if you don't know what your blood pressure is, you could be setting yourself up for a major issue. Maybe you've never had digestive issues before, but the last couple of years, maybe the last couple of months, you've had some digestive issues. And again, if it happens on the rare occasion, no big deal. Happens to everybody. But if it happens a lot, and if it's starting to affect your life, maybe you need to go see somebody. And then lack of sleep. We're going to talk about sleep a couple of times today before we wrap up, because sleep is extremely important, and we know that we need to take care of getting more sleep. Stress and trauma can also affect us mentally. Lack of concentration, mental mistakes, memory issues. And the problem is, none of you folks can have any of these when you're in the middle of a response. So let's say this evening I decide to go out and go through a drive-through for dinner, and I tell the young person, "No pickles, please." Now, I'm not allergic to them. I don't have a medical reaction. I just don't like them. And they put pickles on my sandwich anyway. No problem. No big deal. Just pick them off and just throw them away. You folks do not work at McDonald's. If you're in the middle of a response, you can't always pull up the book. You can't fail to pay attention to what's going on, and you absolutely can't not make decisions, because people's lives at that point, coworkers, the public, their lives depend upon your ability to make decisions and be mentally sharp at that scene, because if not, you or somebody else can get hurt. Stress and trauma can affect us emotionally. We're an anxious society. We're anxious about a lot of things. We're anxious about money. We're anxious about our jobs. We're anxious about relationships. We're anxious about our health. We're anxious about our children. There's a lot of things we're anxious about. And when these things happen at home and or work, it doesn't add to our anxiety, it multiplies our anxiety. 2 plus 2 instead of being 4 becomes 6, 8, or 10. And it doesn't matter who you are. That level of anxiety can be amped up through the roof depending on what happens to you at work. We feel guilt and grief that isn't ours. We feel guilt and grief because we're the good guys. Bad guys don't feel guilt and grief. Give you an example. I was I was assigned in Franklin County, Ohio, and I was the northern part of Columbus. And at that time, that was before Polaris and a lot of that stuff was developed up there. It was just all farmland at that time. So basically, if you're familiar with Columbus, I was responsible for everything north of State Route 161 in Franklin County. I loved my job. I was out doing my thing, looking for impaired drivers, stopping speeders, checking disabled vehicles, backing up officers from other agencies. I was on my way back to the post about 6:30 in the morning when we got a report of an injury crash on a road I had never been on and have never been on since. River Road in Northwest Delaware County. I'd never been on that road before. I had to look it up on a map. I get up there, black Camaro, northbound, 10:30 the night before, at a very high rate of speed. The last thing the driver ever said is, "I forgot." We'll never know if he forgot the curve, the trees. We don't know what he forgot because he hit that tree and he hit it at a very high rate of speed. Instantly killed the driver. The young man in the left rear seat was a big, tall young man. He comes flying up over the seat. All the debris coming back hits him, kills him instantly. As he flew up, the young woman in the middle rear of that Camaro fell underneath his body, and his body ended up coming to rest on top of her, pinning her bent at the waist in the back seat of that car. Her sister crawled out the hatch, went partway out in the field, and lay down to die. She did not, fortunately. We found her the next morning and we got her some help. The young man in the right front seat of the car was the only one wearing a seatbelt, but it broke everything it could possibly break and him not die. Twice that night, vehicles came southbound on River Road, and he yelled and screamed for help, but they couldn't hear him, and they couldn't see the car for the weeds and the trees and everything else. Till a delivery driver that morning at 6 o'clock was northbound, saw the skid marks, saw the car, checked it out, and called us, and we all went up there. For weeks, I drove around feeling guilty. I was out having a good time. I was out doing my job. I really liked what I did. And I'm out doing my thing, and those young people are up there in the condition that they were in. And I felt very guilty about that. I'm friends with the Cleveland police officer who found those women who had been held captive in that house for all that time. Very nice young man, really is. And he felt guilty, even though that house was in his cruiser district. He said, I probably drove by that house 1,000 times, never looked twice at it, had no way of knowing what was going on, but yet he felt guilty. When you folks took the jobs you did it because you wanted to make things better for people. And when bad things happen, we take guilt that isn't ours because that's what we do. Also, back when I was a trooper at Delaware, man walks out of his house one morning to get the paper, and there's a motorcycle and a dead rider laying in his front yard. We go up there and run the guy through the law enforcement automated data system, the BMV records, and under driving privileges, it says, you got to be kidding me. This guy never had a valid driver's license. He's drunk again. So I tell the post commander that I'll go make notification. I go to the house at 7:30 in the morning and I ring the doorbell of his mom's house. She comes to the door and she stands about 5'0", gray hair pulled back in a perfect bun, apron on. The house smelled amazing of home cooking. I said, good morning, ma'am. I'm Sergeant Click from the Highway Patrol. And she said, he's dead, isn't he? I said, yes, ma'am. I'm afraid he is. She goes, did he hurt anybody? I said, no, ma'am. He was by himself. And she goes, did he suffer? And I immediately became a doctor. And I said, no, ma'am. He died instantly. I didn't know. And I'll confess to you, like I do every time I do this presentation, I didn't care. I didn't care way back then. I still don't care today. Who I did care about was her. She told me her husband had passed some years before and her son had been an only child. And while he had cost her thousands of dollars and millions of tears, that was her son. That was her child. That was her family. And no matter what I thought of him, she was sorry he was gone. And again, when these bad things happen, even if it's their fault, we still feel grief for the families because we know somebody somewhere, a parent, a spouse, a child, a relative, a friend, is sorry that they're gone. We feel that because we're the good guys. Bad guys don't feel that. Denial is very easy. Denial is very common. Denial is a waste of time. I heard this back years ago after 9/11. If we could just go back to 9/10, if we could just go back to the 1st of September. Well, folks, there was no going back. The event had already happened. We all know there's no going back. And nobody gets over anything. We get past, we get through, we get beyond. But people want to deny that it happened. I just wish that hadn't happened. I just wish I wasn't the person that had to deal with that situation. I wish I wasn't the person that saw that thing. Well, I understand that, but you were. And there's no going back. There's no undoing it. There's only getting past, getting through, getting beyond, because there is no get over. Denial's very easy. We heard it again a couple of years ago, where if we'd have just locked the country down the first of the year in 2020, we wouldn't have got COVID. Well, don't know that that's true. Australia is an island. Australia got COVID. So maybe locking it down wasn't going to work. So denial, very easy, very common, waste of time and energy. Fear is a good thing. I'll say that again. Fear is a good thing. Fear told you when you were a kid not to stack bricks on the sidewalk. Fear told you not to lean a piece of plywood against those bricks. And fear told you not to ramp your bicycle, mini bike, or big wheel off a piece of plywood leaning against bricks on the sidewalk. And when you ended up in a crumpled heap in the yard, fear walked over and said, "You're a knucklehead." And you begged fear not to leave you because you knew that fear was just trying to protect you, was just trying to keep you safe. But you can't just listen to fear. If we only listen to fear, we'll never leave the house. We'll wrap it in saran wrap and aluminum foil, raise a ribbon around the yard with claymores. We'll just never leave the house. So we strike a deal with fear. Fear, I get it. You're trying to help me. You're trying to protect me. I appreciate that. But fear, I got a job to do. I got places to go. I got things I've got to take care of. I got people counting on me. Fear, I got bills to pay. So we're just going to have to work together. The opposite of fear is panic. Panic gets you hurt. Panic can get you killed. Now, I cannot swim. Can't swim a stroke. Went to the patrol academy. They have a water safety week when you're in the highway patrol academy. I was really worried about that. So I went to the instructor in charge of water safety. And I said, "Sergeant Megason, sir, I can't swim and I'm afraid of the water." He says, "Click, will you put your face in the water and will you trust me?" I said, "Yes, sir, I'll do both." He goes, "You'll leave here being able to swim. You won't win any medals, but you'll at least be able to swim." I was really excited because now I could get in the deep end. I didn't have to stay in the shallow end. The week before our swimming week, Sergeant Megason gets appendicitis. He's replaced by Sergeant Goldstein. Sergeant Goldstein's mission in life is to terrorize us. And he was really, really good at his mission. So needless to say, I left the patrol academy unable to swim. Several years later, I did what any person would do who can't swim and is afraid of the water. I bought a boat. I bought a really cool speedboat. Color of the boat matched the trailer. Both matched my truck because that's important. I went out and bought this big 4-buckle life jacket that was really cool. Color, of course, matching trailer, truck, and boat. I'm out on Alum Creek State Park with my now ex-wife and her son. And she said, "You need to get in the water with that vest to know that it's going to do its job so you can relax and have fun when we're out on the boat." Now, there's two versions of what happened that day: the truth that I'm about to share with you and the lie that those two have continued to tell since that day. The truth is, I got in the water, went down 100 feet, was underwater for 2.5 hours, came up 120 yards from the boat. The lie those two tell is the top of my head didn't get wet. I was in the water for approximately 26 seconds, and I clawed the side out of the fiberglass getting out of the water. As you can imagine, their version's just a little bit more realistic than mine. I panicked, full-blown panic. Had I not had that vest, I'd have drowned. Anybody comes in after me, I'd have taken them with me. All I had to do was relax and bounce in the water like a fishing bobber, but I panicked. Here's my other example of the negative effect of panic. It's now, we're getting into November. Pretty soon it's going to be December. And I was always amazed, December, January, February, that people who are lifelong residents of the state of Ohio, and you folks being from Northeast Ohio, I know you get this. People who have been lifelong residents of the state of Ohio seem to get caught off guard every year when the calendar hits a certain point and white stuff falls from the sky and it covers the roadway and makes the roadway slippery. And I would get to this motor vehicle crash, and this vehicle's wrapped completely around a tree or a pole or something. And I'd say, how fast were you going? And they would very proudly announce 65 mile an hour. And I'd say, I was going 15 to get here. They're like, yes, but I have four-wheel drive, because that makes all the difference in the world. All they had to do was slow down. Now, every winter, and this winter will be no exception, at some point you will be driving in less than ideal weather conditions, and your vehicle will break traction. And when it does, you have two options. Option one, scream, oh my God, cover your face with your hands, slam on the brakes and hit something, a tree, a pole, a ditch, a car, something. Option two, you back out of the accelerator a little bit. You slow the vehicle down, let it settle down. You adjust your steering and you continue on your way. If you panic and you lock up the brakes, you are absolutely, no question, going to hit something. If you stay calm, if you don't panic, you'll come right through it like you have hundreds, if not thousands of other times before. Fear tries to protect you. Panic gets you hurt. Panic gets you killed. There's nothing that we fear more than the loss of emotional control. Not our physical safety, not our monetary, not money. Loss of emotional control is one of the biggest things that we fear. And through the course of my career on the patrol, I never once came back to the post and told people that situation out there, I was scared. That situation out there made me sad. Now, what you might get me to say is, wow, that was exciting. That sure could have taken a different turn. That could have ended up with a different result. That was the most you were going to get out of me. Now I'm retired. I don't have any problem sharing the fact that there were times that I was scared. There were times that I was sad. Law enforcement officers, firefighters, medics, especially when they go to a funeral from a coworker, it can be a beautiful day like today, or it can be dark, rainy, overcast, miserable. And as soon as the bagpipes start Amazing Grace, or as soon as the bugles begin taps, everybody there puts on the darkest sunglasses they possibly own, because heaven forbid anybody see our eyes well up with tears or see a tear come down our cheek. That's one of our biggest fears. We don't want anybody to see that. And the reality is, everybody else is doing the exact same thing I am. The problem with a term like inappropriate emotional response is, what is an appropriate emotional response? It's kind of hard to determine that. Appropriateness is often in the eye of the beholder. My mother passed away this last January, and it was the day of her funeral. And my brother and sister and I all kind of shifted gears and went to our dominant personalities. I began looking at my watch, trying to get everything organized, get everybody seated, make sure the minister was there, make sure this was taken care of, make sure that was taken care of. My brother was already trying to make sure that all the finances were handled, because that's my brother's world. He was making sure that our father was taken care of, and that this was going to be paid for, and that was going to be paid for, and how it was all going to be taken care of, and all the paperwork that needed to be done. My sister was going around checking on everybody to make sure that they were all okay. Did you need anything? Do you need Kleenex? Do you need water? Are you okay? Because that was our personalities. That is our personalities. The funeral director came up to me, and he said this in a way he wasn't trying to be mean or anything. He said, you guys realize this is my job, right? This isn't my first day on the job. This is what I do for a living. And I get that. What he wasn't understanding is that was our emotional response to losing our mother. And whether it was appropriate or not, it's kind of in the eye of the beholder. Now, sometimes we know certain behaviors are absolutely inappropriate. We don't need to go into those, because we all know what those are when we see them. But appropriate emotional response, some people have different responses to different situations. And the appropriateness is very often up to that individual to determine. Been easy to feel overwhelmed the last couple of years. It seemed like every time we turned around, we're at a picnic and we've got a paper plate and we got a burger and a dog. And every time we turn around, life's chasing us with that 4-pound lump of potato salad, desperate to drop it on our plate. First it was COVID, and then it was the events of the summer of 2020, and then it was the election, and then it was this, and then it was that. Even this year, you look at 2022, and we were like, this is our year. Things are going to be better now. Things are turning around. And then Vladimir got bored, and he invaded the country near him, and that threw everything into a turmoil. And then for a while there, and I guess we still probably do, we had monkeypox. And you know what? There's going to be something else, and there'll be something after that, and something after that. But while that was happening, you still had your job. You still had your job, making sure that things are taken care of and making sure that your communities were safe. And you still had everything at home, life, kids, spouses, family, parents, friends, all that continued to happen. And some days it's really, really easy to feel overwhelmed. Perfectly normal reaction. And sometimes that feeling overwhelmed can lead to intense anger. Anger is our go-to. We're comfortable with anger. We can see anger and not be bothered by it. You walk into the break room there at work and you walk in and say one of your coworkers, hey, how's things going? And they look up and they say, I swear the next time the boss, and you're like, oh yeah, let me know what you're going to do. Give me a chance to get an adult beverage and a chair because I want to watch when that happens because you want the entertainment value. What if that same person you walk in the room and say, hey, what's going on? And they look up and they got a tear coming down their cheek and they're clearly sad. They're very upset about something. You're going to flee that room like it's on fire because that's just not something we're comfortable with. We're comfortable with the anger. We're not comfortable with sadness or fear. Stress and trauma can affect us behaviorally. Change in societal perception. Have the last couple of years changed your perceptions of society? So I make an assertion without any scientific backing whatsoever that the pandemic made people who are polite, courteous, respectful, more so. Quicker to hold a door, quicker to say thank you, quicker to say excuse me, quicker to let somebody out in traffic. Those people who were predisposed to that, I believe, became more so. The people that were mean, nasty, and hateful, yeah, they became more so as well. So it was during the pandemic, and my wife and I went to a local restaurant in the Grove City area. And it was only open certain hours, and they had just reopened. And my wife and I go to dinner. And as we walk in, the manager comes up and he says, folks, going to have to ask you to put a mask on until you're seated. Now, we weren't trying to prove a point. Mine was in my pocket, hers was in her purse, but we just came from our home, riding in the same car together. We didn't even think about it to put our masks on. We immediately put our masks on, began to apologize, said, hey, I'm so sorry. I must have apologized too many times between the door and our table. And when I sit down, I said, again, I am so sorry. He goes, folks, you're fine. I just appreciate you being polite and cooperative. I said, some people aren't. And his shoulders dropped and his chin dropped. He said, sir, you have no idea how many times in a given day I ask somebody to put a mask on, or a member of my staff does, and they scream and they threaten and they cuss at us. I just appreciated how cooperative you folks were. Your server will be with you in just a minute. He walked away. I looked at my wife and I said, you know what's going to happen if I'm standing here and somebody goes off like that? She goes, yep, I know exactly what's going to happen. You're handcuffed in the back of a Grove City police cruiser. Absolutely. I wasn't going to stand there and take that. Because again, I believe that the last couple of years have amplified our personalities. And again, polite, courteous, respectful, that has become even more so. Jerk, I think that's become even more so. My folks came down to take me to dinner right after I graduated from the academy. I was 21 years old, living on my own in Delaware, and they took me to a restaurant in Columbus called Victoria Station. Victoria Station was made out of old railroad cars. It was a really kind of a cool restaurant. On Sunday evenings, they had all-you-could-eat prime rib. I love prime rib, as does my dad. The young man came and took our order. We said, prime rib, keep it coming. We'll tell you when. We'd each had 3 large pieces of prime rib. Should have quit at 1. Definitely should have quit at 2. 3 was just being ridiculous. The young man came to the table, and here's how he asked the question. You can't possibly want another piece of steak. At which time we both said, bring it. My mother was so embarrassed, she went out and sat in the car. We ate that fourth piece of steak. Oh my goodness, we were sick. Now, if he had come to the table and said, would you like another piece of meat? Both of us would have said, oh no, that's okay. Thank you. It was very good. We appreciate it. But when you come and you ask me the question that way, how do you think I'm going to answer? The more you tell me to eat, the less I'm going to. The less you tell me to eat, the more I'm going to. And it's not about being argumentative, and it's not about being obstinate. It is all about control. I could not control this thing that happened out in the world. I can control how much I'm going to eat. That's something that's within my control. And again, It's not about whether or not I'm hungry. It's not whether or not I want to cooperate with you. It is all about control. Now, my stepson, I tease him about being a hermit. He likes that way. I teased him one day. I said, you realize a family of raccoons have probably built a home inside your engine compartment of your car. He goes, uh-uh. I said, how would you know? When was the last time you drove it? He went, well, I said, exactly. I mean, he just prefers that. He prefers to order his groceries in. He prefers to order things in. In fact, he has a job where for the most part, he works from home. He likes that. I don't like that. I didn't like house arrest. I didn't like being stuck in the house. I liked being out in the public. I liked going to see people. We are social creatures and we need that interaction with people in order to be mentally healthy. It's easy sometimes to lock yourselves away and separate yourself from others. And one of the big problems that we have is we tend to isolate ourselves with people like us that do what we do, even for the same employer. And I'm just telling you, you got to have people in your life that don't do what you do. You've got to have people in your life that don't work for EMA. You've got to have people in your life that don't necessarily understand your job. That's extremely important that you have those folks in your life, that you have that variety. One of the favorite couples that my wife and I go out to dinner with on occasion is her former hairdresser and his wife. Now, he's a hairdresser. That's a new conversation. She works for an architectural firm. What we don't talk about is work. Now, what you can't see is sitting here at the Shipley building on Columbus, Ohio. It's about 35 feet that way is my wife's desk. She works in the fiscal services section for the patrol, and we can actually sometimes hear each other when we're at work. We work that closely together. She's been with the division for over 20 some years. We know the same people. We've both worked for the highway patrol. And because of that, sometimes we tend to talk about work a lot, mine and hers. You need to have the variety. You need to, whether it's the kids your kids play soccer with, whether it's people from church, whether it's people in your neighborhood, folks you went to school with, you've got to have a variety of folks in your life. Withdrawing and separating yourself, not healthy. I was talking to a gentleman from the Department of Corrections one day, and he said, you know, Steve, I got in my truck to drive home the other day, and I just burst into tears. I have no idea where that came from. I said, I know exactly where it came from. You've been smashing it down all this time. And finally, your body's like, we're not smashing it down anymore. If you're not going to do something to take care of us, we're going to get rid of it. We're going to hit the emergency pressure release. Did you feel better? He goes, I felt stupid sitting there crying. I said, no. Afterwards, did you feel better? He goes, you know, I did. I said, well, then let's come up with some ideas, some techniques, some strategies so that we can get that out of your system before the bad thing happens and you lose it standing in front of a bunch of inmates. Your body's going to make that decision for you, folks. You have no control over it. Nothing to do with gender, nothing to do with age, nothing to do with position, nothing to do with rank, nothing to do with job responsibilities. The body makes that decision for you. Folks, as Americans, we don't get enough rest. We don't. We have an inability to put things away. We have an inability to okay, today's done. I'm going to move on. We stew about it. We think about things we should have said. We think about things we should have done, and it's not healthy for us to do that. We've got to be able to put some stuff away. One of the other problems that we have is caffeine. You should not have caffeine 6.5 hours before you want to get good restorative sleep. Now, I know people that say, hey, I can drink coffee and go to sleep. Well, yeah, if you're exhausted enough, the body will shut down. But are you getting good restorative sleep? My wife takes very good care of me. And usually when she's out running errands or doing whatever, she always calls to see if I need anything on her way home. And one night she called about 9:30 and asked if I needed anything. And I don't know where this came from, but I said, yeah, I'd like a large Dr. Pepper. And there was silence. And then my wife said the 3 words that I most love to hear from her. Are you sure? Now, folks, I love to be challenged. I love to be questioned. Not so much. So I growled back, yes, darling, large Dr. Pepper. She bought it. I drank it. Went to bed at 10:45 like normal. 2 o'clock in the morning, I am wide awake, staring at the ceiling. Why am I awake? Oh, yeah, large Dr. Pepper. No caffeine 6.5 hours before you want to go to sleep. We're going to talk about blue light here in just a couple of minutes. Folks, alcohol consumption is up. It's up across the board. It's up across the country. We know that at the beginning of the pandemic, what did they close? Everything. What stayed open? bars, liquor stores, and marijuana dispensaries. Those things stayed open. I was that guy that I was waiting at the grocery store at 7 a.m. in the morning, waiting for them to open up the door so I could sprint to the part of the grocery store to buy my one package of toilet paper because I was so paranoid that we were going to run out. And I could only get the one package. I couldn't buy cleaning supplies. If you did, you could only buy one. I could fill my cart with beer and wine. Nobody questioned because alcohol consumption was up. Again, I was on a call with a state agency one time when I was with OMOS, and the gentleman at the beginning of the call said, I realized last night that I'm drinking twice as much as I used to, and everything got quiet. He said, I realized that when I went to take the trash out last night, and the bag was heavy, and the glass bottles clanked. I don't think I can drink less, so I'm just not going to drink anymore. I mean, that was a pretty self-revealing revelation on his part, the fact that he realized he was drinking too much. Alcohol is a part of our culture, and it really is. So you could say, hey, guys, we're going to have a bunch of folks over this Saturday. We're going to watch the Ohio State-Indiana game. We're going to, have some great food. We're going to have a couple of fire pits. We're going to have a really good time, some big screen TVs. Oh, hey, by the way, no alcohol. Somebody in your world was all in until you said no alcohol. We call that a clue. And folks, don't think because you do what you do, you'll know, because I was the worst drug cop in the history of American law enforcement. I could not find cocaine in Colombia. I couldn't find a joint at Woodstock, but I could find a drunk in a dry county at 3 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon. And I worked when I was on the motorcycle unit with a young man that every day he went home, and before he took those boots off, he started drinking, and he drank to pass out. Not intoxication, pass out. And I never realized it. He come to work that next day, and there's no doubt in my mind there were times he was on that bike and he was under the influence. Myself and the other officers, we completely missed it. So don't think because you do what you do, you'll immediately know. I can tell you this. For every one of us that's here today, somebody in your world is fighting a battle with addiction. In your personal or professional world, and or somebody's fighting a battle with addiction. It can be chemical, drugs, alcohol. It can be process, shopping, gaming, sex, working out. Somebody somewhere is fighting a battle with addiction. You may know, you may suspect, and you may not have a clue. But I guarantee somebody in your world is fighting that battle right now. Before the pandemic, we really didn't notice a lot of what was going on. Law enforcement tend to notice a little bit more, but most of us kind of went through life and we didn't notice anything. During the pandemic, we noticed how close people were. We noticed if they were wearing a mask, were they wearing it correctly? Was it down below their chin? If they sneezed in a grocery store, normally we wouldn't have even been able to tell. Now we knew how many aisles they were away. Did they sneeze into their hand or did they sneeze into their elbow? Was that a COVID sneeze, a cold sneeze, or a dust sneeze? We became way more alert to the environment over the last couple of years than we ever were. My folks would have been married. My folks would have been married 60 years this past May had mom not passed away in January. And they didn't have anything figured out. They weren't smarter than anybody. They just chose not to give up. So I've got two little techniques to kind of throw out to you folks this afternoon to see if one would work. And if they do, great. If they don't, no worries. The first one is called Bad Day. And here's how Bad Day works. You walk in from work and the person at home wants to tell you that we got a letter from school, the car's making a funny noise, and the dog pooped on the floor. But before they get a chance to tell you all that stuff, you look at them and shake your head and go, bad day. Bad day says, let me in the house. Let me take a shower. Let me relax for just a couple of minutes before I start taking all this stuff on. There's rules to bad day, though. Before we go to bed tonight, I have to not only tell you why today was a bad day, not a day, why today was a bad day, but I have to listen to what the letter said, what noise is the car making, and why is the dog pooping on the floor. Bad day applies to the person at home too. So you come home from work and you come in the front door and you're so excited because something happened at work and you want to tell them, they go, bad day. Means feed yourself, feed the kids, clean up the dog poop. But before we go to bed, that same rule applies to that person. They have to tell you why today wasn't a day, why today was a bad day. And then they have to listen to what you want to tell them about work. And bad day has to be nuclear. You cannot walk in the door every day just like they can. As soon as you walk in, throw your hand up and go, nope, bad day, leave me alone. Doesn't work that way. That other person has to know when you say those words, it's not a day, it's a bad day. And they have to know what that means. The second technique that I've heard about, and this is one I personally struggle with, is called support or solution. And support or solution works this way. Somebody important in your life, spouse, friend, coworker, comes to you with an issue. And before you get too far into it, you go, hang on a second, support or solution. Now, why I struggle with this one is give me any problem on the planet and I will give you a solution. May not work, may not be the best one, but my personality is such, I'll give you an answer. Again, may not be right, may not work, but I'm going to give you an answer. If it's a solution, this is a conversation. You want to hear what my input is, you want me to give you some ideas, that's solution. If it's support, I need to shut up. I just need to be quiet. And that's the one I struggle with because my wife is an extremely capable supervisor. She does an amazing job. She's been doing it for a number of years, knows way more about her job than I could ever hope to know about her job. But my ideas, my solutions to her issues, they don't apply. I was in charge of troopers. I was in charge of troopers who rode motorcycles in the middle of traffic, for goodness sake. My techniques, my terminology, my wording doesn't work in her world. So often I just need to be there for support. I'm not good at that, but I'm getting better. Stress and trauma can affect us spiritually. We're told from the beginning of time, God controls everything. Everything's in God's will, everything's in God's plan. And we begin to wonder when bad things happen, how did God let this happen? How did God let this happen to me? How did God let this happen to my coworker? How did God let something like COVID happen? And sometimes that can lead us to a loss of faith, given what we see, given what we know. Sometimes it's easy to have that loss of faith. Sometimes we have an over-reliance on faith. God's not going to let anything bad happen to me. I don't have to pay attention. I don't have to wear my seatbelt. I don't have to do any of that stuff. And you know what? Talk to any minister. They'll tell you that's not how it works. If you walk out in the middle of the interstate not pay attention, you're going to get smoked. God's not going to pick you up and put you on the berm. God's not going to wipe the traffic off the freeway. You're going to get smoked. Now, I'm not a forgiving person. I'm a grudge holder. I hold grudges against people I've never met. I hold grudges against people who don't care. But if I can't forgive, how can I expect to be forgiven if I make a mistake? I know I'm not the only person who've ever been driving up the road and suddenly find myself on the rumble strips because I was paying attention to the radio or I was looking at my phone or I was daydreaming or whatever, talking to my wife or something, and I find myself on the rumble strips. Well, what if somebody had been there changing a tire, issuing a traffic citation, answering directions? What would have happened? I didn't mean to hurt them, but I did nonetheless. I know I'm not the only person who've ever been sitting in traffic in town, so focused looking to the left so I could make my right turn on red that when I did, I completely missed the pedestrian. And what happens if something bad happened? I didn't mean for it to happen, but if I can't forgive, how can I expect anybody to forgive me? And that includes ourselves, because sometimes we have a change in our sense of self and our own abilities. And again, I'll go back to the idea that I'm sure I'm not the only person that is on the call today who has at some point in their life thought to themselves, maybe that wasn't the best idea. Maybe you realized it on your own. Maybe it was pointed out by a supervisor, but you made a mistake. You didn't do something you should have done, should have known better, but you did it anyway. And sometimes that can change our sense of self and our own abilities. So we've talked about what are some of the things that you might see. Let's talk about some things and how we can help ourselves and help others. Well, number one is exercise. Now, in all honesty, I used to work for a woman when I was on the patrol whose idea of a good time was to run 10 miles, bike 25, and swim for 2 hours. And that wasn't training for anything. That was just a Tuesday. Now, my idea is if I got to run from here to the door, somebody's probably going to jail. If the farthest you've ran since college is from the couch to the refrigerator, if the fastest you've ran during a commercial break, and the most weight you've lifted is 12, 24, or 32 ounces, next week don't try to do a triathlon. You can get there, but not this week. It takes some time. If you have to ask directions to the weight room, today is not the day to go in and lift the stack. Again, you can get there, not today. We're not good at free time. We really aren't. So if we take a day and we didn't do anything and we just basically, wasted the whole day in our minds, we don't feel good about that. Now, when I say structure your free time, let's say it's going to be a beautiful day. So you know what? I'm going to go out and I'm going to get that last minute stuff done. I'm going to go and I'm going to clean up the leaves. I'm going to sweep out the garage. I'm going to clean the cars. I'm going to do all the edging, get the mower ready to be put away for the winter. I'm going to do all that stuff that I know I've got to do. Okay. Maybe it's going to be terrible weather. Maybe it's going to be cold and rainy and nasty and you know what? I'm going to sit in my chair and I'm going to watch football all day. That's okay too. You can't do either every single day, but make a plan. So maybe, you know what? I'm going to sit in my chair and I'm going to watch football today. That's your plan. At the end of the day, as you look back, instead of going, I wasted a whole day, you're going to say, what did I intend to do today? I intended to watch football. I did watch football. Okay. I can't do that all day tomorrow, but I could do it today. So I had a structure. I had a plan for my free time. Cut yourself a little bit of slack. I do not like the term new normal. I know some other people don't as well. I think new normal is a little bit too crunchy, a little bit too tree hugging. I don't care for the word new normal because new normal implies good, and not everything's going to be good. Some things are going to not be good. Everything, though, is going to be different. And you've had a series of different normals your whole life. You just didn't know that's what they were called. When you graduated from high school, when you went to college, and you graduated, when you got married, when you had children, when you started doing the work that you do at EMA, maybe you've accepted promotion or transfer. All those things were different. You didn't even know that that's what they were. And hopefully you feel like those things worked out for you. Now, coming out of all the pandemic and everything else, not everything's going to be good, but not everything's going to be bad either. As a person that travels around the state of Ohio, stopping at gas stations to buy sweet tea. And then a little bit later, I got to go get the key so I can go to the bathroom and get rid of that sweet tea. I don't mind plexiglass in some of the gas stations I stop in. I'm okay with that separation. I don't mind it in some restaurants. I really don't. Not everything's going to be good, but not everything's going to be bad. What everything is going to be is different. So when you hear people talk about new normal, make it different normal. That's more realistic. That sets a more realistic expectation that is not going to be good or bad. It's just going to be different. I can't guarantee that I can help you. I can't guarantee that a clinician can help you. I can't guarantee a chaplain can help you. What I can with almost 100% certainty guarantee you is this. If you don't talk about it, it will not get better and it will almost always get worse. And if you're somebody that somebody else comes to talk to, unless they are a threat to themselves or others or admit a criminal offense, you don't need to tell anybody. My spouse and I aren't getting along. Nobody's business. My kids and I are struggling. Nobody's business. That call last week really upset me. Nobody's business. Just like you hope they would protect your confidentiality, you have to protect their confidentiality. Folks, avoid self-medication with drugs or alcohol. Now, you're grown-ups. If you want to go home at the end of a workday and you want to have a beer, not 12. If you want a glass of wine, have a glass of wine, not the bottle. And if you want a Crown and 7, have a Crown and 7, not 6. If you're in recovery, ignore everything I just said. You don't get to drink. And when it comes to prescription medication, if your name is not on the bottle and it doesn't have a recent date, don't take it. Your symptoms can be exactly like they were at one time. They can be exactly like somebody in your household. But if the prescription isn't in your name and it's not recent, don't take it. Get a hold of your doctor, get a hold of your clinician, go see them. If they believe you need medication, make absolutely sure they know what you do for a living and that you can continue to do that on your medication. Make sure that there's no questions asked. But you're grown-ups. At the end of the day, if there's no other reason why, and you want to go have an adult beverage and relax for just a couple of minutes, have an adult beverage and relax. Just don't make your situation worse by self-medicating with drugs or alcohol. We are not good at letting people help us. In fact, we're terrible at it because we're the people other people call for help, and we've got to get better at it. As we were moving into last year, Reverend Richard Ellsworth was the chaplain for the Ohio State Highway Patrol, had been from 1991 to 2021. Reverend Ellsworth passed away a year ago, August, at the age of 96. He had served his country in the Second World War, two theaters of the Second World War. He was a minister for over 50 years. He's the one that married my wife and I. Actually, I think was minister for more than 70 years. Actually married my wife and I. We were very close. And as Rev was coming to the end of his life, when I would talk about him, I would get very emotional. I would really struggle being able to get through it. I went to one of the clinicians that I work with and I said, all right, what's the deal? Is it because I'm retired? Is it because my hair's turning gray? I mean, what's the deal here? And she smiled at me very condescendingly and she goes, nope, you're just finally growing up. In other words, you're just finally acknowledging the fact that you know your time with Rev is coming to an end. And that realization is hitting you. Now, that's exactly what I needed. I didn't need a hug. I didn't need psychobabble to explain to me about motion and everything. I needed someone whose opinion mattered a great deal to me and still does, to tell me I was having a normal reaction to that abnormal circumstance of the fact that I knew we were going to lose Rev. Folks, you got to let people help you. There's a term, there's a phrase that I'd like you to think about at this point. You cannot be all things to all people at all times. You cannot be all things to all people at all times. You want to be, you try to be, and everybody falls short. And when you fall short, you're not taking care of the folks that you want to. So what else can you do? Well, number one, spend time with others. That's very important. We're not designed to be alone. We're designed to spend time with others. Coworkers who were involved in the same incident can benefit by spending time together. They have a shared experience that the rest of us don't have. No matter how supportive and empathetic we want to be, they have that shared experience. Let yourself have bad hours or bad days. It's not always going to be Skittles and rainbows. But I would ask you to do this. If days become weeks, and certainly if weeks become months, please seriously think about going to see somebody, going to see a mental health clinician, a counselor, a chaplain, somebody like that. You don't have to suffer through that. Again, bad day, they happen. Bad weeks, even those happen. But when they turn into multiple weeks, and certainly if weeks start to become months, please go and get some help. Be careful about journaling. You know, I've had this conversation with a friend of mine here recently, and we talked about social media. And, you know, you sit there and say, but it's my personal social media. I can put whatever I want. Okay. If there's ever been a reference to what you do for a living, if there's ever been a picture of you at work, if anybody in the community knows who you work for, put something stupid on social media and see how fast somebody else gets involved in your social media. Folks, you got to do the things you enjoy. It's important. It's imperative. It's not a matter of choice. Ride your bike, ride your motorcycle, play with the kids, the grandkids, the dog, needlepoint garden. I don't care what it is. You have to set aside that time. The agency won't do it and can't do it. Neither will your families. You have to set aside that time for yourself. And you need to understand you're not the only one that feels the stress from what's going on. We've all been through the last couple of years, a lot of stress and trauma. So understand, sometimes you got to afford those folks some grace and hope that they'll afford you grace as well. Don't make big life changes. If you want him or her out, you'll want him or her out next week. If you want a new car, buy a new car. Not because something bad happened at work, because you want a new car, you need a new car. Don't base it on what happened at work. Do make as many small decisions as you can. What am I going to have to eat? Am I going to wear blue or am I going to wear brown? When I go walk this afternoon, am I turning right or am I turning left? Those things are very important because it gives you the confidence to build those and make those really big decisions that you might have to make in your life. We got to get better rest than we do. We have to make rest a priority. We got to shut everything down, whether it's, you know, the caffeine, whether it's, you know, the room it's got to be dark, it's got to be cool. You know, it's just, we got to be able to get better rest. As we get older, we need more rest again. You know, we go through our 20s and we think it's cool that we run on 4 or 5 hours sleep a night. But as you get older, folks, can't do that anymore. You need to get some better rest. Recurring thoughts, dreams, flashbacks are normal. Don't fight it. You're not going to win. That's how we learn. This worked for me. I'll do this again. This didn't work for me. I won't do that again. And that's how we learn. The brain processes, and then we've got to allow it to do what it does. We got to eat better than we do. Now, if you want to eat garbage, eat garbage. Don't blame the department. Don't blame your agency. Don't blame your employer. Just own it. At the beginning of my career, I lived on caffeine-free Diet Pepsi, peanut M&Ms, Reese's Cups, and Burger King. That was my 4 main food groups. I was 21 years old. I could get away with that. I'm almost 59 now. Can't get away with that anymore. We got to try to eat better than we do. But if you want to eat garbage, again, you're a grown-up. Eat garbage. Just don't blame anybody but yourself. Try to limit your screen time. And I know this slide is so ironic given the fact that I'm talking to you folks online. But as much as you can, if it's not required by your job, try to limit your screen time, whether it's telephones, laptops, tablets, whatever the case may be. Try to get those things out of the bedroom. The bedroom is for sleep and and electronics interfere with both. You got to get them out of there. 1.5 hours before you want to go to sleep. 6.5 for caffeine, 1.5 for electronic light. And it used to be because the actual physical light had an effect on you, but now that's not the case. They've got filters. What it is it's the content. You're reading it, your brain's processing it, you're thinking about what you just saw and heard. And it takes your brain a little bit to shut off. Hitting the off button on the TV and turning the light off in the bedroom doesn't immediately turn off your brain. Your brain continues to think and process and do things for up to 1.5 hours. So 1.5 hours before you want to get good restorative sleep, no light, no electronics. 6.5 hours, no caffeine. And the news media tells the same 3 minutes over and over and over again. Now, at the beginning of the pandemic, I was living on the news. And my wife finally one day said, you're done. 30 minutes, that's all you get. 1:30, 6:5s, 3:10s, 2:15s, don't care how you break it up, 30 minutes. And when I stopped living on the news, my anxiety level dropped. And I've realized something. I'm smarter than they are. Tell me what happened. That's all I need you to do. Tell me what happened. I'll decide how I feel about it. I'll decide how it affects my family. I don't need 20 minutes of you telling me what I need to think about it. I'm perfectly capable of making those decisions on my own. Just tell me what happened. If you limit your screen time, if you limit your media time, I think you'll find your anxiety level might come down. What can family and friends do? Well, listen. They don't want to know what you think they should have done. You don't want to know what they think you should have done. Just listen to them. Let them talk. Let them roll. Spend time with them. They don't always want to be alone. They'll let you know. Hey, I need a few minutes. No problem. I just need some time to myself. You got it. Reassure them they're safe, but don't baby them. Nobody likes to be babied. Help with things around the house. Help with things around work, but don't take over. Because when you take over, you tell them you can't handle the big stuff, much less you can't handle the little stuff, much less handle the big stuff. So help, but don't take over. Give them some personal time, but be available if they need you, if they want you. Personal time is extremely important. And you got to remember, sometimes their anger, fear, frustration, while you may be on the receiving end, wasn't necessarily directed at you. Right after one of the malls here in Columbus opened up for limited hours, my wife asked me to take her to the mall. So we drove up there, and when we got there, she goes, aren't you coming in? I said, oh, no, honey, COVID. I didn't care. I just didn't want to go inside. She goes into the store. Now I am parked passenger door to the only other vehicle in the parking lot. It's a beautiful fall evening. I've got my windows down, my engine's off, and I'm playing with my phone. I see a woman walk out of the store, and she starts walking towards the vehicles. As she gets to her vehicle, she opens up the driver's door and she says this in the following manner: you need to have a mask on. Now, folks, I don't know that's what she said. I do know that I'm sorry, I don't know that's how she said it. I do know that's what she said. I blew her up. Oh my goodness, the 14 F-bombs in the first sentence. Man, I let her have it. I did not call her a name. I did not threaten her. I did not touch the door handle of my truck. But man, I blew her up. She got in her car and she drove away. And I realized after the fact, I know where that came from. I had been smashing it down and smashing it down and smashing it down. And this woman came along and she was kind enough to offer me this slow pitch target. And it would have been rude not to take advantage of it. And folks, I took advantage of it. If I could find her, if I ever knew who she was, I would go back and say, ma'am, I'm really sorry. What you said to me did not warrant the response you got from me. I should have just said, have a good evening, ma'am. Not said anything at all, just continued to play with my phone. Had no reason to blow her up other than the fact that I had been smashing it down. And some of the people you work with, some of the people you interact with in the community, understand maybe they're not having a great day. And if you can kind of remember that sometimes and afford them the same grace you'll hope that they'll afford us on occasion, might make things a little better for you. Be careful about things that you say after things happen to folks. Be careful to say, I'll be there for you if you can't be, because they're going to hang on that. Be careful to say it could have been worse. They already realize that. Don't say things like, I understand, because if you do, they'll challenge you. How do you understand? How do you know what it's like to have gone through what I've gone through? And if you have, that's great because you have that shared experience. If you haven't, you've just lost credibility. Stop searching for the perfect thing to say. It doesn't exist. You can't undo the bad thing. No matter what you say, no matter what you do, no words can undo that bad thing. You can do more damage. Sometimes there's nothing wrong with just standing there in silence saying, you know what? I'm here for you. And that's about some of the best things that you can say. Don't baby them. Nobody likes to be babied. Tell them you're glad that they're still there. You're glad that they're okay and that you're there for them. So the reason that they've asked me to talk to you folks today, and we're getting wrapped up here, is your mental health and your mental wellness is your responsibility. It's not EMA's, it's not the Ohio Department of Public Safety, it's not a clinician, a chaplain, it's nobody's responsibility. It's your responsibility. You have that responsibility every day to yourself, your family, your coworkers, the community that you serve. You have that responsibility. And when you come to work, everybody, including your coworkers, has to have the reasonable expectation that you're physically and mentally capable of doing the job. That's not unreasonable on their part. You've got to be prepared to be able to do that. You have to be 100% every day. Sometimes people's lives, their livelihoods, their safety, their ability to be able to continue to live may depend upon you being 100% laser focused when you come and respond to a situation. I've heard for several years, my agency doesn't care. That's a true statement. No agency cares. EMA doesn't care. The Highway Patrol didn't care. The Department of Public Safety doesn't care. It's an agency. It's a department. It was here before me. It will be here after me. People within the agency, you folks, that's who cares. Not the department, not the agency, not the desk, not the phone, not the computer. People. And you have to take that initiative to take care of yourself and others. Why did they ask me to talk to you folks? Your culture and personality make you fixers. That's what you do. You take disorder and chaos and you fix it. That's what you signed up for, and you're really, really good at it. That's why we do this. But sometimes you need to be reminded that you're important too. I use the airplane analogy. When you fly on an airplane, at the beginning, either the pilot or a member of the flight crew says to you, in the event of an emergency, oxygen masks will fall from the ceiling. Please put yours on before you attempt to help anybody else. Why do they say that? Is it because you're more important than anybody? Absolutely not. But if you're incapacitated by lack of oxygen, if you're out of the fight, you can't help that person with mobility issues. You can't help that person with small children. You can't pop that 70-pound exit door and get it out of the way so people can exit the aircraft. You need to take care of yourself. Folks, I need you to take care of yourselves. I imagine that much like a lot of public safety jobs, there's not a lot of people lining up to do what you do. I need the folks that are doing it to continue to do it well. I need you to do it in a healthy way, and I need you to be able to finish out your careers in a happy and healthy way and be able to look back and say, you know what? I'm glad I did that. I'm proud of what I've done, and I'm ready for the next chapter. Folks, I'd like to finish up before I put this out for any questions that you might have. I like to finish up my presentations, and a lot of folks have heard this, but I finish up with what I call the whole story. And the whole story goes like this. A man standing in a hole. And he's standing there and he's looking around, and another man walks by up on top, and he looks down in the hole and goes, hey buddy, what are you doing down there? The guy in the hole says, well, as you can see, I'm stuck in a hole. Guy up on top thinks for just a minute, takes out a prescription pad, writes a prescription and tosses it down in the hole. Thanks, he says, helpful. Still stuck in the hole here. Pretty soon a woman walks by and she looks down and she says, sir, what are you doing down there? And he goes, well, ma'am, as you can see, I'm stuck in a hole. She thinks for just a minute. She closes her eyes and she folds her hands and she says a prayer. She walks away. Thanks, helpful, he says. Still stuck in the hole. Pretty soon another person walks by and this woman looks down in the hole and she goes, what are you doing in that hole? He goes, well, can't you see I'm stuck down here? She thinks for just a minute. She jumps down in the hole with him. Oh my God, he screams. Why did you do that? Now we're both stuck down here. She goes, because I've been here before and I know the way out. Folks, this whole conversation this afternoon has been about you taking care of yourselves, your family, your coworkers, your friends, your community. It starts with taking care of you. I want to thank the Cuyahoga County EMA for allowing me the opportunity to talk to you folks. I want to thank you guys for spending a little bit of time with me on a Tuesday afternoon when I know that there's so many other demands upon your time and you've got so many other things that you need to do. I really, truly appreciate you spending this time with me and giving me this opportunity. Mark, I'm going to open it back up. If anybody has any questions, I'm all yours.
Thank you, Steve. Really appreciate your time in this presentation. I'm sure others feel similarly. You are a great storyteller. I can't believe that we've already gone, an hour and a half has already essentially gone by. This went really fast, and I think that's a testament to just the quality of your presentation and the way you tell stories. It's you're very good at that. So I really appreciate you again spending this time with us. As I mentioned earlier, if you have questions, you can please feel free to pop them into the Q&A area of the Zoom, the Zoom platform, and Kevin will go ahead and read those out loud and we'll work through them. So if anybody has a question right now, please go ahead and take a couple seconds here to see if anybody does. And I'm not seeing any. And that's fine. I know, Steve, you had put your contact information on one of the prior slides. So obviously, if someone does think of something that they want to ask you, I assume they can feel free to do so via email.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Anytime.
We are also, just for everybody's awareness, going through a renovation on our website right now. We do plan to post our speaker series presentations like this. So for those that found value in this and think that it would be great for some of their other colleagues to access this content in the near future, we should have this presentation posted, providing we get permission from Steve, of course.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, again, I just there are some questions, Kevin. So I guess I will turn it over to you.
So I think Steve actually answered it, but it was whether or not he has any advice for a city wanting to start a new wellness program for first responders. And Steve answered to reach out to him via email, and he can definitely help get that rolling.
Mark,
Great.
I'll make sure that you have a copy of the presentation. I'll email it to you when we close out this afternoon. So if anybody that you want to share it with anybody, I've also got a resource document and a description of some of the courses that we offer through the Ohio Office of First Responder Wellness, and that's open to any of the EMAs or anything else like that. I'll get in the car, I'll come see you, I'll do it, I'll do it online, whichever way you'd like.
Awesome, that's great. And yeah, we can any resources that you want to share with us that we can then disseminate amongst the group that was on the presentation today, even the ones that were registered but didn't attend, we can easily do that. So we appreciate that too, Steve.
Okay.
With that, I see no more questions. Oh, sorry.
This was recorded, so if you're okay with it, we'll post the recording to our various
That would be great. Yes, sir.
Awesome. That's
all
all.
right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Remember, please register for our final session that is scheduled on December 6th. And if you have any questions about doing that, please feel free to reach out to us. Other than that, thank you again very much, Steve, and take care, everybody.
Thanks, folks.
Have a great day.